Dennis Embry is the president of Paxos Institute. He's a scientific entrepreneur who markets programs for social improvement, including something in association with the state of Florida on child abuse and multi-problem behavior. David Geary is a past member of the National Institute of Sciences, and so it goes on like this. So this is an outstanding group of scientists that are going to convene in November, hosted by the University of Miami, my colleague William Scott Green, Vice Provost and Dean of Undergraduate Education. And so this has already been made possible through the efforts of myself on the scientific end, and Jerry, who has already received donations very generously provided on the basis of his efforts. And during this workshop, we're going to review the theory, we're going to review applications, we're going to publicize this, and based on all of these folks, including our own connections, so the Carl Sagan Academy and Jerry's connections in Florida, plus my own work in the city of Binghamton, plus all these other folks, is that we'll be able to rapidly move this from science into the real world. Okay, now let me just try to convey to you, based on my own reading of these people's work, and of course this will take place at the workshop, how it's possible for evolution to have insights on these things. There are certain basic insights that follow directly from an evolutionary perspective. Often they seem like just plain common sense, at least in retrospect, and yet strangely they are not reflected in this case, early childhood education. And one thing that an evolutionist always does when they're confronting some aspect of current human behavior is try to imagine what it was like in the ancestral environment, because we are a biological species, we evolved in a certain environment, and we really need to understand our innate psychology against the background of life as hunter-gatherers. Current-day hunter-gatherers provide a rough approximation. I think it's a good bet that hunter-gatherers need to learn more than us, not less, in order to survive out there in some very harsh environments. So it's not as if us civilized folks have to learn all this stuff and primitive folks just have to rely on instinct. No, not at all. There's a tremendous amount that they need to learn. And yet when you review the literature on how children are raised in hunter-gatherer society, what do you find? No formal education, little adult direction of any sort. Adults don't tell children what to do. That's in part because in hunter-gatherer societies there's a strong prohibition against telling anyone what to do. There's one general thing you can say about hunter-gatherer society is that it is fiercely egalitarian. And so if you like democratic principles, you'll love evolution when it comes to the instincts, the social instincts that are manifested in small face-to-face groups, especially hunter-gatherer societies. When hunter-gatherers ask, how do you raise your children, what rule do you use, their main rule is don't beat them up and don't harm each other. And after that, go out and play. It's more or less the way it goes. No praise or criticism, no distinction between work and play. Children naturally play at what's important to learn. Play usually involves mixed ages, and this is so very important. This is a point emphasized by Peter Gray, one of our participants. If you look at the natural childhood learning environment, almost invariably takes place in mixed ages, and children are learning not from adults, but from slightly older children. Think of it as a ladder, whereas if you have mixed age play, then you can climb the next rung of the ladder, which is what someone slightly older than you is working on. If you take away mixed age play, you have children and adults, and you have no middle rungs of the ladder. So this is proving to be very important. Mixed play is primarily cooperative. If you're playing in a mixed age group, it's just stupid to beat someone that's much younger than you, and it's stupid to try to beat someone that's much older than you. And so the play becomes naturally more cooperative. And so this ends up being a powerful educational system by which culture is transmitted, and a lot of culture is transmitted without, that self-organizes and runs itself. And against this background, modern education appears thoroughly on adult-driven, authoritarian, strict age segregation, divorced from play, primarily competitive. And Peter Gray, who I just heard give an inspiring talk on this, said you go to a zoo and you see those poor animals pacing up and down and biting their hair out and stuff like that. We know that's cage behavior, and that's why we don't study animals in zoos, unless we do it very carefully. That's why we know how important it is to study animals in their natural environments. And when you look at some of the problems that exist in schools, says Peter Gray, it's cage behavior. It's cage behavior. And so there's a great need to get back to basics. Peter Gray, also in this talk, he said, I went to the latest edition of the Handbook on Child Psychology, 5 volumes, 5,000 pages, and I looked up in the index for curiosity, nothing. Exploration, nothing. Play, 9.5 pages out of 5,000 pages. Mixed age play, nothing. And so this is why it's possible for tons of science to be done. But if you're not oriented correctly and asking the right questions, it's all going off on a tangent. So this is the sense in which we can be brought back to basics by taking an evolutionary perspective. Now, this is not a matter of trying to emulate the Stone Age environments in our educational system, not at all. Because among other things, what we need to learn, skills of modern life, are very different than the skills of hunter-gatherer life, of course. And many of them are not natural. Compare language acquisition, which is natural, and learning how to read or do mathematics. Okay? There's a reason why that takes a long time. It's because our minds are not genetically adapted to do that, other than our capacity for culture. So we have to be smart in how we use this information. But there are some things that we can do. For example, there's no reason why we can't incorporate mixed-age play into an educational system. And there's no reason why we cannot incorporate egalitarian norms into our classroom culture. And this has already been done by Dennis Embry, the scientist entrepreneur, something called the good behavior game, which has been well validated. And I can give you more information on this. This is a program in which you establish norms of appropriate and inappropriate behavior by consensus. You ask the children what counts. In a game-like fashion, what counts as appropriate and inappropriate behavior. You put it up on the wall. You rehearse it in a game-like fashion. There's all sorts of clever details to this. And so this manages peer pressure to reinforce appropriate rather than inappropriate behavior. This results in a dramatic decrease in classroom disruptions within days.